Welcome to ABA On Call with Rick Kubina and Doug Kostewicz. Explore insightful ABA discussions. Stick around for a chance to earn a CEU. Listen for 3 secret words, note them, and claim your CEU after the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to ABA On Call. Doug, I thought for today, and you did too, that this should be a episode where we review a book. We do this occasionally, and sometimes I think we should do this more. These books that we read, that you and I tend to overlap in some of our reading, are similar. And this one is something that interests us both, and we have no doubt that this is going to interest everyone who's listening to this podcast. And this is a book by Dan Ariely, who is a famous psychologist. And the book's called Misbeliefs: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. And that title alone says it right there. So let's spend this first section just talking about, for people who might want to read this book, what's it about? So how would you describe this book to someone if they wanted to know, okay, you read this book, what's it about?
So obviously, a major theme is misbelief, but the route that the author takes is not just listing tons of misbeliefs and kind of squashing them. What he looks at is, how do people formulate these misbeliefs? How then do we interact with people who are dominated by misbelief? Too often we may just dismiss them and they'll just get over it, or we can't listen to this. And it's just very interesting, all the different ways, and we'll get to some of the explanations later in the show, but the different ways that the author, Dan, looks at establishing misbelief in today's day and age. But, he looks at some of the different factors over time, but it's just mesmerizing sometimes to listen to the stories and how he personally interacts with people who are dominated by misbelief.
Yeah. Part of this book, which is absolutely frightening, and what brought him into writing this book, is he was identified as being part of the Illuminati. And he had experienced many situations where he would go online, he would receive emails, people not just threatening death to him, but people saying, I want to be the person that inflicts pain and suffering on you before you die. Or I want to be, just the worst thing. And it's incredible to hear his journey. And, we don't need to get into how all of this is, because it's a fascinating story that he keeps revisiting throughout the book. But it's frightening to think that it's one thing for Bill Gates. I'm sure people who listen to anyone who talks about conspiracy theories, Bill Gates is linked with so many, because he talks a lot about vaccinations. He's very pro-vaccination. He's done lots of charity work, but yet he is considered the most evil person in the world, and people are constantly bringing his name up. So I'm sure he has to have full-time security. I'm sure, he can't just go to your, Kroger's or Piggly Wiggly or whatever store you go to and go shopping, because people are out for this guy. So conspiracies are not just something that you can laugh about. People take it to the next level.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned, and takes you on a journey through his book, through his experiences, not only his terrifying experiences, but his enlightening experiences, and not in validating the conspiracy theories, but in validating the various people who vehemently believe in misbelief and trust the wrong people. It was just so enlightening, because so many, I guess, things we think it's just all social media. That's what gave rise to, there's been conspiracy theories for years, well
Forever.
before social media.
That's right.
Definitely that has played a role, but he goes so much further. And I thought it was very interesting the way his examination of the world and some of the things that we'll talk about today, that are worthwhile. Definitely worthwhile to take a look at if this is a topic that interests you.
Yeah. I would say one more thing about his style that I appreciate. He approaches this with compassion.
Hmm.
And that's a big thing, especially in our field. A lot of people talk about compassionate care. And here are people that are literally wanting great bodily harm to come of him, but yet, he tries to understand, well, how did you get to this place? And that's what this book's about. The first chapter uh, is called, how could that person believe that thing? And I don't know if you had a chance to go over this list but there are just maybe 50 different conspiracy theories on here. And for those of you who know conspiracy theories, and here's the other reason why I think this book is important. Every one of us in our life knows someone that believes in some conspiracy theory. Maybe not in your family, maybe in your family, maybe in your extended family, maybe in your professional circle, maybe somewhere, someone you
Maybe
know.
one of your heroes in media, whatnot, they
Yeah,
have nobody's above
absolutely.
this. And yeah, there's just so many. And there are so many that are opposite of the same situation. There are people that believe the exact opposite of another conspiracy theory. And it's just one on top of another on top of another. I mean, and I think we'll go into why is that problematic, but there are so many. So what are some of them that are mentioned?
Well, there are some, I don't even want to say classics because that makes it sound a little flippant, but Sandy Hook, we all remember when that happened, that was
Hmm.
just a hoax. People think that the parents were actors, crisis actors, I think is the word that they used.
Yeah.
And heck, I mean, if you're following the news, uh, Alex Jones, who's one of the very pernicious people who said that this was a hoax, basically egging his audience on to harass. Can you imagine being a parent who just lost their child to horrific gun violence and these yahoos coming to you, telling you what a bad person you are? And not, Doug, it just hurts my heart to think about those parents. And of course, to Alex Jones, I, I don't even know what the exact number was, but it was in the
I think it was a
millions.
billion.
Was
No, it
it a
was a
billion?
billion.
Maybe it was a billion. And
That's
you know what?
I'm almost
I wish it was
positive.
more than that because it's so heinous what he did. But the Sandy Hook has been around, like you said at the beginning of the show. This is something that has been around. It's not a recent phenomenon.
No, no, it's not. But it's able to be spread faster now with the advent of, social media, the internet, etc. But you can find others who agree, or you can find explanations for yourself as you struggle with different things. And some of those explanations look and feel right. And sends you down a path that kind of establishes that misbelief. And it's hard once you believe something to not believe it anymore.
Well,
We
yeah.
sometimes we say it's so easy that, oh, throw the data at the situation. No, that's and Dan talks about that. It's like, just because people are presenting with the data doesn't mean that's going to change any of their beliefs.
Let me throw out some more conspiracy theories that
Yeah.
don't seem as far-fetched. Climate change is a hoax. Been around for a while. That's
Mm-hmm.
one. Cell phones cause cancer. Heard that
Mm-hmm.
before. Holocaust, there's Holocaust deniers But then this is Holocaust death counts are exaggerated. So some people were killed, but not as many as were said.
Right.
The moon landing was faked. Uh, O.J. Simpson was framed by the police. Uh, let's see. Of course, there's the 9/11 conspiracy theory that the Twin Towers was an inside job from the government. Robert
Mm-hmm.
F. Kennedy assassination was government conspiracy. But there's some in here that I hadn't heard of. The Rothschilds family controls the world. Do you know who the Rothschilds family is? I hadn't heard this one
I
before.
do not. I heard it. I remember when listening to the book, but it didn't spark anything that I've not interacted with that one before.
And Vladimir Putin poisoned Hillary Clinton to prevent her election. I'd never heard that one before either.
I've heard many different things that regarding Russia, the election, and etc. But some of it has some data, some of it doesn't, and people are taking it to the these next levels that help
Yeah.
explain, right?
I'll tell
So
you one more. There's a national,
okay,
there is a national, or no, there's a national conspiracy to kill police. And I hadn't
wow.
heard that one either.
Mm-mm.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. We could go on and just, these are just some of them, but some of these may seem like, oh, what's the harm in that? Whereas there's always harm in this. And I think that brings us to our first secret word, which is
And that's the. Oop,
evidence. You're going to try to steal the secret word from me, weren't
I
you?
was, but you went ahead and said evidence was the first secret word.
I did. Well, let's move on to the second part. And
Yes.
we could easily continue talking about just so many different parts of the book, but let's just talk about what was our favorite part. So why don't you tell me, Doug, what was it could be multiple parts, but
Right.
if you're going to tell somebody, something that jumps out at you that you liked, what was it?
So he shares one thing that I like that so he shares a lot of data from studies, but he also goes on some case studies like where because he gets close to these individuals, he shares some of these stories, and he shared a story of a mom, a single mother, who at the beginning of COVID had a son who had to then come home because of the quarantine. Well, as the child was put back, had to come home, stress, job, I can't do this. So you start to see these increases in stress, and the child got in trouble for not wearing a mask. Well, she went to the internet to try to find out about these masks. Is it such a big deal? And she started to read about how masks deprive oxygen, masks dry out eyes, masks do, etc. And then this moved her into this, well, why are you making my son hurt himself? Wear a mask, etc. And so she was going down this path, a rational person who wants to care for her child starts to believe all this misbelief about COVID and mask wearing, and finally comes to the conclusion because Dan had advised schools about the reasons why we should wear masks and, hey, we need to get back into school, made her own connections and viewed him as this evil person that about mask wearing. And it had nothing to do with that. And that just the whole story of someone who had nothing but the best intentions, not someone going out and looking for problems, but looking for advice, help, just got down the wrong path, and how firmly misbelief kind of took over her life. And now it's a conspiracy to wear masks and it hurts people. This was obviously from a few years ago. There's a lot less mask wearing now, not to say that we should or should not, but the conspiracy around that, it was just it was sad to see that, but enlightening to see someone take that path and not just, I want to hate everybody, so I'm going to find what I need. It was this person trying to do the right thing and just get picked up by that whole situation. Go on.
Yeah. When you were talking, I was thinking that this isn't said in the book, but this book really is about how we acquire misbeliefs. And that woman, I remember that story very well. And because of social media, now when anything happens in the world that is a big event, immediately a conspiracy theory comes out. Doesn't matter what it is, guaranteed something that's really big, like, oh, there was a hurricane or the pandemic. But I remember when the pandemic first started and we were locked in, like that was really shocking for us. And they were going around showing, it was in Florida somewhere, and maybe it was a school, and people were allowed to talk. And I remember this older woman who was like the woman that you described, and she was like, "Oh, why are you doing this to us?" It was this group of representatives, and I just remember feeling really bad for this woman because it was like someone's grandma, and she firmly believed this, and whatever drove her to that, that misbelief was in. It was done, and
Yeah.
there's no turning back.
No. So
Well,
that was my fear. I want to hear yours.
yeah. There's a lot to favor in this book. One thing I didn't say this earlier, but I do want to say this now very quickly. It's one thing to read a pop psychology book. Like if you've ever read anything by Malcolm Gladwell, that guy was a reporter. And there's other people like him that do intensive research, and then they say, "Oh, here's like Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point," and it's pop psychology, and there's kind of some truth to the things that they bring in. But what I love about his book is this guy is a true expert. If you think about people in behavior analysis who are at the very top of the field, looking at you, Doug, these experts who just spend their entire life and can, just spit out all these references, write books, write, chapters, articles. That's what this guy is. And I love the work that he's doing. This isn't a cobbled together narrative. This is a real theory that he brought together because these are things that he looks at through his lens. Now, he's not a behavior analyst. So some of this research I wasn't familiar with, but nevertheless, that's okay. The world's big, it's psychology, and you can still take so much from that. And there was a chapter that he wrote, which was labeled Picking the Villain as a Way to Regain Control. And in this chapter, what I appreciated was the whole narrative and the whole way that we try to vilify someone, because once you make someone else responsible, oh, it's not your fault anymore. And it feels good to know that, oh, I'm not at fault. This other person is doing it for me, which can explain, like when we talked about Bill Gates earlier, this
Yeah.
COVID some people say, I don't know. Let me take that back. When you talk about the COVID, how it happened, a lot of people will say it was unleashed in a Chinese lab. Some people will say it's the Illuminati. So I guess that kind of is where the Bill Gates come in. And that's where Dan Ariely was part of it. He said that, he was part of the Illuminati. And the thought was they created COVID so that they could reduce the world population. And that way people could be more controlled, docile.
Right.
And that picking the villain really resonated with me because I see this a lot just when you talk with people, and it doesn't even have to be on a grand scale. It can be something on a small scale, like in your job, something bad happens, like you and I both work in universities. How much dean blaming goes on? Oh, the dean's doing this because, blah, blah, blah. It's just so easy to make the dean a villain, and now every bad thing that happens is a result of this one person.
Yep. Yep. I think the story you have, the story I had, and the villain, those are really, I mean, we're barely chipping the surface of all the cool things in this book. And, but I do have a bonus extra fun part.
Okay.
Ready?
I'm ready.
In one of the chapters, he talks about 3 heuristics that we tend to violate on our way to misbelief.
That
And
was
I just
chapter
wanted to
4, Doug. Chapter 4, the one
I'm
we just talked
sorry.
about.
Okay.
So keep going,
what?
keep rolling.
Oh, keep rolling. Okay. So 3 heuristics. And one we know about when we talk about the, characteristics of science being parsimonious, looking for, or like Occam's razor, looking for the least complicated solution first.
Yes.
Get rid of that one. Then there were 2 more that I never heard, and I forget the name of the second one, but it goes like this: Don't move to someone's evil intentions that could be explained with stupidity.
That's Hanlon's razor.
There you go. Thank you. See, you're the namer, I'm the talker, and I think that's an awesome. We go to malice before we go to ineptitude, right? We just there was a major horrible reason here, right? If we violate that starts to lead towards misbelief. And the final one is Hitchens' razor, where that without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And so it's
that asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
And so the those 3 things really are interesting ways of approaching as we start down a path to misbelief. As you can kind of test yourself on those 3 things as you're moving towards understanding a situation or understanding the plight that you're in or understanding a world event. You want to gear yourself towards those other things rather than the motivation, the complicated, or things that are asserted without evidence. So I just thought that was a really cool part too.
Yeah, I'm with you. Those razors, the idea of a razor, you're cutting off something. Those 3 are just fabulous. And like Occam's razor leads to the principle of parsimony. That's in our textbook. Everyone that goes through behavior analysis learns about Occam's razor. Maybe they don't know that term, but if you apply those 3, I agree with you. The Hanlon's razor is another good one. And I was thinking about after I read that, I remember, like if you ever drive down a construction zone and, you're in the lane and then all the people are going in the other lane and they're trying to get to the front and cut in. And that annoys the hell out of me. And, sometimes I'm almost like, I almost get passive aggressive. I'm like, I want to drift my car over a little bit. So it makes it harder for them. And that's kind of a jerk move. And I don't do that often, but every now and then I really want to do it. And one time I was driving and I wasn't even paying attention. I was that person who was in the left lane, who went to the very front. And I remember when I went to get in, some guy shaking his fist at me. And that was, that was Hanlon's razor right there. Don't attribute that I'm being mean, that I'm doing this. I just didn't realize what I was doing. And so don't assume malice. That's what that is. And I wasn't being mean spirit. I wasn't trying to cut the line. And so that those 3 that you said really can help us cut through so much of what's going on when we're thinking about these conspiracy theories, but also they're just helpful in life.
Okay. Well, that brings us to our second secret word, and that is conspiracy.
A very apt secret word. So the third part.
Let me introduce you to this, and because I want to hear your thoughts. So we like the book, we like the topic.
We do.
One thing that I struggled with a little bit is it really didn't have a behavior. So I would look at these initial reasons very differently from a behavior analytic lens. Not to say these aren't happening. Obviously, they're happening. People misbelieve all the time. But looking at some of those reasons. So from a behavior analytic lens, what were some of the things you take away? How might you maybe change an explanation? How might you look at this slightly differently? That could make it a tad bit more parsimonious in
Yeah.
explaining how these things are established.
I cannot help but funnel everything through what I've come to understand the world. You and I are both scientists, and the people who are listening to our audience by and large are applied scientists and can appreciate a behavioral lens. And what I love about the book is that he's trying to take this very complex thing that happens with people, which is we have this misbelief. I mean, this is all verbal behavior, but yet one of the things that he talks about a lot and when he references other people, it immediately goes to the mind. And we just
Right.
had an episode about this recently. And we talked about how when you invoke the mind as a causal agent, it's not a robust way. It violates parsimony. You're
Right.
injecting something in the equation that doesn't need to be there. And
Right.
as I'm listening, I really wish that this, I mean, it'd be great to have someone at the level of his knowledge interpret this completely behaviorally, because, that's something that we have to do. But there were other
Mhm.
components where they talk about personality traits,
Right.
and personality traits is thought of, and it's just like the mind.
Right.
Why is someone doing what they're doing? Well, you have this personality trait in you, Doug. And damn it, if there was a way to change that attribute of your personality, which, you know, it's probably something that's going to be stable through the lens of a psychologist, and they're really hard to change. It's much harder to change, but that's not how we look at the world.
Yep.
And
Yep. Let me interject here. So you talk
yeah,
about personality. One of the excuses, or not excuses, his explanations that I did like regarding personality was that certain personalities are kind of ripe for misbelief. And
yeah,
I'm looking at that a little different, right? And I think you look at it the same. Certain histories, certain behaviors, certain things that are going on in your life may make you more or less uh, likely to find something reinforcing going down that path. But I didn't like that if you're a narcissist, then you're more likely to do this. If you're a bit more introverted, you're gonna do. So I didn't like it felt more like you're done. Once you're in
yeah,
there, it's kind of you're kind of going down misbelief. You're set to go. And I just
yeah,
felt like that was a oversimplification of something that is way more complex, but also can be explained more simply. I don't know
yeah.
if that made any sense, but
No, it totally did. I mean, he talked about personality traits and personality states. In the
yeah,
states, so the trait being a narcissist, that's stable, that's who you are. Whereas the state is something like road rage, and he was bringing that up to try to show that there's hope. But I agree with you that if we accept that people have these lifelong stable, then forget it. Game over. It's really hard to change who you are. It's like in your DNA. And I'm using that metaphorically, not scientifically. Uh, what if we look at the complexity of a person's reinforcement history, which that's what it's not satisfying when we think about behavior analysis. Here's one thing that you have to deal with as a behavior analyst. You're dealing in probabilities. And
right.
what are those probabilities? I don't know. When we start talking about these misbeliefs and how do you deal with them, there's all of this stuff that happened before. So you can create a theory on how someone arrived at where they are. But then if you're going to take action, what can you do? And again, to his credit, he does talk about what would be some ways that you could change someone. It's not necessarily through reinforcement, but some of it you could see that yes, this is probably what he's thinking.
Right. Another interesting thing that I could appreciate. So he covers a little bit of the notion of ostracism. Why I'm having trouble with this word?
That's a tough word.
Go ahead, say it for me.
It's ostracize, and it would be
ostracization.
There we go.
I didn't zero. Okay,
it's close enough.
So being excluded, and he talks about that is that he talks that like as a again his words maybe or our words maybe like a motivation, and that you once you get ostracized, that you kind of are set to go other places. So when you bring your thoughts to other people and they dismiss you and then exclude you, you're in a state of extinction. And what was really interesting is they hooked these people up to fMRIs, and the same areas of physical pain lit up when they were ostracized. And we know as behavior analysts, if you will do things to avoid pain. So if you are being ostracized by certain people, you will go and seek to not be ostracized. And that sends you to certain groups that regardless, that will maybe share your thoughts. So his take was not to reject people when they bring their beliefs, but to what I teach my teachers, and that's to stay close, build a rapport. You don't have to agree with them, but you don't reject them. You listen to them and you set the stage that we can have a conversation, because you are not prompting them to that potentially painful situation to then escape from that, to go find somewhere else, to gain some attention, which will increase the likelihood that they'll go to the relief of going there. So I thought he was so close to explaining that. It was just eye-opening, because he uses those exact terms of, I try to build rapport with people. I want to listen to them. I don't agree with what they have to say, but I treat them like human beings, as you mentioned earlier. And all that comes into play is very behavioral. That explanation is very behavioral, and also establishes you to be able to give, because all of this comes down to rule governed behavior, not contingency shaped. And that is, if you can do that, then you're establishing yourself as the ability to give that rule governed behavior.
Yeah.
To that misbeliever.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because with the rule governed behavior, we have the two classes. We have rule governed, and then we have contingency shaped. And it helps explain how some people can be so fervent in their beliefs that they cross the line. And if you are gambling your life, that, for example, there's AIDS denialists in the world. If you have AIDS and you're like, well, all of Western medicine is a conspiracy, and you try to take some natural cures, you're gambling with your life. And once that contingency hits and you're dead, that's a pretty big gamble. But the rules that were established, like if you say climate change is a hoax, well, what are you going to do in your daily life? For you not to believe in climate change and for you to just do whatever, that's not going to have an immediate impact in your life. But some of these other rules can quickly shape into contingency shape behavior, which would have very poor outcome for you, your loved ones, and others.
Yep. So we're coming down to the end, but this was something when we were talking about this, and I just wanted to share it. I thought it was a really cool observation. We've talked about this before in previous podcasts, the notion of establishing the ability to do critical thinking as a way to make proper decisions, to evaluate information so that we don't get taken advantage of. when you read this book, when you listen to the things that are said, critical thinking isn't enough in
Yeah.
understanding individuals as they interact with their environment. And if you look at the role behavior, those contingencies are on this will govern behavior, you can be a really great critical thinker and get sucked into these because just because you know about the contingencies doesn't mean you're above the contingency. And that you can get you can be a critical thinker about 99% of things and be sucked into one huge misbelief. And you will defend that misbelief no matter what. And it's almost like data doesn't matter over here, but I'm going to violate everything else. And so it's, people, we've read books where if we could just get everybody to be a critical thinker, then we'd be good. But that's not enough. And it was really eye opening.
Yeah. That's such a brilliant point, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think that what we have in this book, Dan Ariely, Professor Ariely did a solid by spending so much time writing it. And what you just said is so impactful because for years I've held that belief myself. Like, damn, we just got to get people being better critical thinkers. But it's so much more than that, and that's what this book is about. And I would say to our audience, if this is something that you find meaningful or you're interested in, this is a book you should read. It's very good. And I would not be surprised that if we see Professor Ariely being invited to like ABAI or other conferences, because this is something that as fellow scientists, we all can learn from this book in the wisdom that is shared.
Yeah. Let's go with the third secret word. How about that?
Do it.
So the third secret word is peanut.
Love it.
Love it. What a good ending to a good podcast.
Well, that's the pod, Doug. Let me thank all of you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you on the next ABA On Call.
Thanks for watching this episode of ABA On Call. To get your CEU, follow the link and instructions below the video. You can enjoy the program again there, or you can go straight to the attendance verification quiz. Just enter the secret words and pay the CEU fee to generate your certificate.